So I want to share with you some different identities I hold on campus, just to kind of set the tone for our room today. I am an LGBTQ safe space ally. I'm an undocumented ally. I'm a VetNet ally, which means I work with our militarily connected students and their supporters. I'm a disability ally, and I am a foster friendly ally. As I said, I facilitate that workshop on the campus. I am not telling you all this to virtue signal and be like, look how woke Darcy is. That's not it. I want you to all know that I take everyone's identities very seriously, and I want you to feel comfortable and welcome in my space, whether we're on Zoom like this, whether you come to this fun office sometime, whether you see me on campus, whether you're in one of my classes one day. Everyone is welcome in my space. And it's really important to me that you know that because I want you to be exactly who you are. And I'm also mental health first aider, which means that I have extended training to help support people who might be going through mental health crisis or challenge. I'm not a licensed therapist, but I'm a mental health first aider. So again, just some things that you know about, like, who's this lady? Also, I'm a nerd by all of the toys that you can see in the background. And if any of you have been in the TAP Center, my husband works in the TAP Center as a student assistant. He's the very tall, very tattooed guy named Sean, who's sometimes quiet, but he's really nice. And so we are both involved in higher ed in different ways. And he came back to school for my adult returners, my transfer folks, and my parenting folks, because he just wasn't pregnant, but he was 3 out of the 4. He came back to school after 25 years. And I'm not telling his story. He would tell you that as well. So let's talk about this workshop. Let's get organized. Let's get organized with everything. So when you're looking at these scholarships, right, it is really important to understand, like, what is being asked of you. And we're going to look at a sample tonight about what the prompt is, right? Because what you're really being asked for is to write a personal statement. And I'm going to go into a little more depth, right? We want to know what does the question ask, and answering the question. I know that seems like a no-duh statement, like, well, of course, Darcy, of course we're going to answer the question. But I can't tell you how many times, as somebody that works with students on personal statements for grad school, for with foster friendly ally training, I work with my students on using their stories to empower themselves and to share with other people. How many times people don't want to go deep and they don't want to go into the things that have happened. Now, big asterisk here, everyone, big note. Nobody has a right to your story. I don't believe that you have a right to walk up to anyone and be like, tell me about the worst things that have ever happened to you. For sure, I don't believe that. But I think when it comes to personal statements, especially with scholarships and sometimes grad school applications, when they're asking you for, like, hey, what are some obstacles you faced? I see students kind of shy away from that. We're going to talk a little bit about that in just a few. What are the limitations? This is so key, right? And I know sometimes you feel like there's no way I could hit 2 pages, single space. There's no way I could hit 5,000 characters. But sometimes when you get on a real tear, right, you get in that zone of writing and you're writing and you're writing and you're writing, it goes faster than you think, so much faster than you think. And so you want to make sure you're not going over, but you also want to make sure you're not super under either. You're all in school. You've all written a paper that maybe you're like, I tried to get to that 4 pages. Or you ask the question, does my title page count? Normally it does not. Just, normally the title page doesn't count. But, making sure that you are giving enough to truly answer the question, because they want to know who you are, right? And then how are you going to submit the personal statement? So, like, with these scholarships, these TAP scholarships that the TAP Center has been so great and will be linking it, right? And it's linked in their link tree on Instagram. The IG, it's got it there, right? But you want to make sure you know whether it be these scholarships or other scholarships that you're submitting in the right way, okay? So, be authentic. Be honest about what you're sharing. One of the things that I see in students writing quite often is that I'm not hearing their voice come out. And you might be like, but Darcy, there are 100 of us in this room and you won't know each one of us. I hear that. But they don't want you to sound like everybody else. They don't want your experiences to sound like everybody else because they know you're not everybody else, right? So like for myself, when I went to write scholarship applications and other personal statements, I checked every box. I checked every box of my story that I was comfortable sharing, right? And y'all just heard me talk about low income background. I was also housing insecure at times. I was food insecure at times growing up. And so I talked about those things because those things are challenges to our education, to continuing school. I think the challenging part for us sometimes when we've gone through things, and obviously we all have our own unique sets of circumstances for sure, but when we're going through things, we only have us. So we don't necessarily think that our story is any harder than anyone else's, any more challenging than anyone else's. And sometimes I think we even have this weird assumption like, well, everybody goes through something. Like, oh, well, I don't have it as bad as other people. But they're not considering other people when you write this, they're just considering you, right? And so, you know, in my personal statements for, you know, for grad school and for some of the scholarships that I applied to once I knew they were there, talked a lot about the challenges based on what they were asking, but I had to be authentic, right? I don't want to read a personal statement that sounds like you trying to be somebody else. And it will come across. I know that might sound like really strange, but think about if you were a reader, if you're a book, right? Or even if you're not a reader, think about when you watch a movie or a TV show and you've got like your favorite character. And then all of a sudden you watch an episode where you're like, they wouldn't have done that. That's not authentic to them. Like, why would they have this person acting like this? That is what happens when you write in not your own voice. As all of a sudden it goes from like, and as somebody who teaches, I'll see students write all semester and be like, great. And then all of a sudden I get a paper and I'm like, who's this? And it's not because it's an issue of plagiarism. It's like they're trying to write as somebody else, right? So make sure that you're honest about what you're sharing, but also like not just honest about what you're sharing, but also not using words you wouldn't normally use, right? Because you don't want to submit something, and let's say a scholarship requires an interview. You don't want to sound like a totally different person in that interview. So it's really important, right? Then you also want to talk about, does this reflect who you are? Like, if someone read this that knew you, would they be like, oh yeah, this is absolutely Laura. This is absolutely Jess. This is absolutely Fatoshi, right? Like, who does it reflect? That's important. And we want it to reflect you, right? And so in here, right? And I know I'm using words in this slide that are like field and program and things like that. Like the example we're going to use tonight is from the TAP personal statement. But these are things that you want to consider when you're talking about your educational goals, right? I always knew like I wanted to be a helper. And I thought for a long time, I was at a disadvantage because of the fact that people, I didn't have a specific job in mind, right? And let me tell y'all, if I was just waiting for an American Studiers job, I would have no job because that job doesn't exist. But thinking about when I got into the field and I started applying to things, like why I wanted to help and how I wanted to help, right? And so maybe you're like, I don't exactly know what job I want to do and what my exact academic goals are, but it's important to think about maybe themes, right? Do you want to help? Do you want to serve? Do you love working with children? Do you love working with adults, maybe aging adults? Things like that, right? Do you want to work with other students in your same demographic as far as like transfer students, adult returning, parenting and pregnant, things like that, right? So those are important. Why? So it's just like, not just what is it that you're looking for, but also why are you applying to that specific scholarship? I know your first answer might be like, well, because they have money. And I get that, right? Of course. We're trying to get the money. But again, it's like, what about that scholarship stood out to you? Because a lot of the scholarships have very specific requirements that they are looking for. And outside of the scholarships that the school offers, because right now the Fullerton General Scholarship application is open that you can find on the portal. But we have these other scholarships that TAP is talking about. And then you have other scholarships that are outside of Cal State Fullerton on things like FastWeb or the other scholarship search sites. And sometimes those scholarships are so specific, you might be the person. And this is why you want to make sure you're really like hitting all of those points, because maybe they're looking for a very specific combination of things and you don't want to miss out on anything.
Excuse me, Darcy.
Yeah.
We just want to make sure you're not screen sharing right now, right?
No, I am.
Okay, we only see your background.
Oh, that's weird. Let's double check that. Hi, everyone. Sorry about that. Let's reshare. The PowerPoint has been fighting me a little bit tonight, so can we see it now?
Yes, we can.
All right. I don't
Yes.
know what happened there. So you want to think about what about the scholarship you're hitting on and making sure you're answering all those prompts. And again, what you're hoping to gain out of maybe a program or the scholarship. Again, I know money, that makes sense. But you want to think about those larger pictures because they know you're applying for a scholarship to get money. That's why you're applying for the scholarship. And the biggest reason, can anyone throw in the chat for me why scholarship money doesn't get used? Let me see here. Whoop, get into the chat. Because no one applies. That's right, y'all. Nobody applies. And so that's really, really, really important in that. Nobody applies. And they don't think they're going to be chosen. And here's the thing. If you don't apply, you're for sure not going to be chosen, right? But the worst they can say about a scholarship is no. The best they can say is, yes, here's some money, which is great. And also, I'm seeing some stuff in here too. We are going to send out the slides, y'all, and we will absolutely, and you can feel free to screenshot them. Absolutely, please do. But people don't know about them. They don't end up applying. And the thing is if you start to work on these personal statements, right? And even if you build like longer statements, I really recommend that you save your extras. So like, let's say you needed to write something that was 3 pages and you ended up writing 4 and editing it. Save the 4-page version. Save the longer version because you might use that later. And I don't know about you all, but I know for myself when I write, as soon as it leaves this brain of mine, it has left the brain, it's on the paper. And if I delete it, it's gone. So I always keep an extras. So keep different versions of those things. That's really, really important to be aware of. And again, they don't want to hear that, like, they don't want to hear in a general sense, like, hello, I had some challenges, but I got them done. And here I am. And I pulled myself up from the bootstraps and all of those things. Like, they trust that you are a good student. They trust that you are going to overcome things. And it's not called a general statement. It's called a personal statement. And so you really want to make sure that you're getting personal. Again, no one has a right to your story. And so you don't have to give people all the nitty-gritty details of things, but you can get a little bit more in depth and show what those challenges are. So those are some things to think about. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. All right, I'm going to change the slide and I hope it doesn't go back to the background. And thank you for those of you who think the background is lovely. I took that picture in Glacier National Park a couple summers ago. So I took that actual picture. It's beautiful. And that little island you see is the island in the opening of the film, The Shining. Again, I'm a nerd. All right, let's see if this will work. Are you all still seeing the actual slides? Yes, good. Thank you, Britton. I appreciate that. So getting started, right? Open a separate Word document for each statement. And what I should have put on here, and I will fix these slides before Miss Laura sends them out to you all, is open a separate document for extras, right? Do that. Then again, we're going to break down that question and find out what it's really asking. I'm going to show you example. And then get words onto paper. Get words onto paper. I think one of the challenging things in the current space we live in is we live in a space of finished products. You go onto TikTok and you see this really polished 15-second video and you think, wow, they really nailed that on the first try. They probably did not nail that on the first try, y'all. Like they were probably like, and then I had to go back and do it. And like a 15-second video like took 2 hours, right? It took 5 hours. The books that you read, even your textbooks, do not come in one draft. No one sits down and is like, oh, here it is, perfect, and then sends it to the editor, and then the editor goes, French chef kiss, everything is fine, send it to press. That is not what happens. There's revisions made and revisions made and revisions made. Just start writing. Just start writing, okay? It is a process. You want to do drafts and you want to have people look over it, okay? I don't know about all of you, and this is funny because I love to write, but the idea of having to submit a rough draft when I was younger in school was so tedious for me. I was like, oh, I just want to do the paper. But the more I learned process, the more I learned drafting, the more that I was okay with that and improving myself as a writer, the better it got. And then to have someone look over it can feel a little like, ooh. But again, especially with a personal statement, and if you're sharing some, challenging things or some things that you wouldn't share with anyone, share it with somebody you feel comfortable with, right? My students that I work with in the Guardian Scholars share a lot of their stories with me, but that's not because I'm just like, give me your stories, because we have a relationship. We build that relationship, right? And so perhaps if there's a professor, somebody in TAP, a mentor, even just a good friend that you feel comfortable, have them look over it, right? Have them look over it, and not just look over it, but there's 2 things that I recommend whenever you're writing something, which is 1, give them the prompt or read them the prompt so they know what you're addressing in your personal statement or in your paper. And then read your paper out loud. Why out loud? Darcy, I don't love reading out loud. That's uncomfortable. The reason I want you to read it out loud, right, is that 1, when you read things out loud, you will catch mistakes or typos that you haven't caught by just looking at it, or that maybe Grammarly or spell checker isn't catching because it might be like a what instead of a was. And so it goes, oh, that's the right word. That's not a misspelled word, but really that's not the word you're trying to use. Or maybe you left a fragment sentence in there. It will, reading it out loud, because you have to focus in a different way, you'll catch yourself. I do it all the time, okay? Plus, reading it out loud helps you hear the flow of those things and how you are thinking about how you sound, how it sounds, right? And so, and then you get to get feedback from that person, like, that's the prompt, this is what they were asking, do you feel like I answered those things? Or if they know you well enough, hey, you didn't mention, your first generation status in here. You didn't mention, that you're a transfer student. Oh my gosh, that was the whole key. Because sometimes the things in our head don't make it to the paper, right? And you may have taken I get frustrated when professors I've had are like, here's the question, and then I'm like, I think they have put more on the paper than they have, and it's more in their head, right? And so we want to think about, am I actually saying everything I need to say? All right. So those are important things, and be willing to work on that feedback and some of those wordings. The other thing you really want to do as you're tailoring it a little bit more, and this is just in getting started, is if that scholarship is asking for very specific types of things, let's say they used wording around student success. Let's just use that kind of key phrase for a second, student success. You want to make sure that you're including student success into your personal statement, right? Mirror that language, just like you would on a resume. If you're tailoring your resume to things, if you're tailoring a cover letter to a job description, you want to also do this and mirror that language so it shows that you're paying attention to the language they're using. Because for any of my folks here that are Disney folks, big Disney people, if you were applying, let's say, to a Disney scholarship, and you referred in that scholarship application to people who visit Disneyland as customers, is that using Disney language? Anyone want to throw that in the chat and let me know what they call, do they call them customers? Definitely not. No, ma'am, they're guests. That's right. They're called guests. And so again, thinking about mirroring that language, thinking about the culture of the scholarship you're applying to, writing and making sure you're mirroring those things. That's really important, right? It's so important. And so, yes, we are still on the getting started slide, Ashley, we are. So thinking about those kinds of things is really important in that. Yeah, and again, just start writing. Just start writing. Does not have to be perfect the first time. It will not be perfect the first time, and that's okay. Drafts are important. Fine tuning is important. And I know while you may not be writing academically the rest of your life, you're going to be writing in some form or another the rest of your life. And this is where I really encourage students to have a growth mindset around writing, which is making sure that you know that if you don't feel like you are a good writer, I hear that a lot. I'm not a good writer. I'm not really a writer. You can become a better writer. You just have to practice that. And I write in certain fields really well. American studies, great. Creative writing, no problem. Journalistic writing is more challenging for me. So again, I have really good strengths in certain areas of writing and challenges in others, but again, it's that still working at it, still working on those things. So just be aware of those things. All right. Again, a reminder, it does not need to be perfect, just needs to be a reflection of your experience. And your experience is not what is being judged. It's not. They're looking at the personal statement, they're trying to determine need. And that's the thing with a lot of these scholarships is that you might get turned down for a scholarship, and I've been turned down for scholarships too. And that's not because you didn't do a good job, it's just it might have been an overwhelming response to that scholarship. And they determined other people had different need. So it's, again, doesn't need to be perfect, just needs to be a reflection of who you are. So let's look at an example. And here is the TAP scholarship personal statement from the link. All right. And we're going to start with this, then we're going to break it down. So this personal statement prompt says no more than 2 pages double spaced. So they don't want any more than 2 pages double spaced. Include the following. Tell us about yourself and your academic and professional goals. What motivated you to return to college, and how will you use your degree in your career choice? What are some obstacles / barriers that you have overcome to get to where you are today? And how do they relate to your education and your career path? Okay, so all those things that we are talking about in there. So now let's break it down. Let's go into these 3 chunks, and you can even break it down further. So the first part is personal statement. No more than 2 pages double spaced. Include the following, right? So that's the first part we're looking at. So we know that we want to make sure that when we are checking our draft and our formatting and everything in Word or Google Docs, that you have the double space set. The other thing I'll say on this is make sure you just have 1-inch margins. Google Docs, I learned with a student last semester because I don't use that a ton, automatically puts you at 1-inch margins. So if you then go and add another inch, it suddenly looks like you're writing a poem. Don't do that, right? So 1-inch margins, again, double spaced. So that really, this is a fun trick I use when people get nervous about how much space. That's 1 page single space. That's not very much to write about. Okay. And again, you may overwrite it the first time, and that's okay. You can edit, and this is why you work with someone and get feedback on how to trim it down. Okay. The second part on this, tell us about yourself and your academic goals. Why are you motivated to return to college, and how will you use your degree in your career choice? And really, what we could do with this is even break this into another 2 parts. So tell us about yourself and your academic and professional goals. And that could be as simple and direct as, my name is Darcy Anderson. I am a adult returning transfer student, a first generation adult returning transfer student who came from a low income background. My hope is to finish my degree so I can help other students who also had the same experiences that I did when on their academic journey, right? That's like a couple of sentences, but it says a lot right there. Checks a lot of boxes, right? And this can be other identities that you choose to share in that sense. First gen, adult transferring, parenting, pregnant, these things. Check those boxes. You can check them really directly, right? So tell us about yourself and your academic and your professional goals. Then, what motivated you to return to college is another piece in that, right? So what did motivate you? I had a great conversation with a student yesterday that was sharing that they'd gone to community college the first time, did not get a lot of help at that community college, and then decided to return to school, and really was doing it because they had had a loss and they really wanted to do it for the person that they lost. And when I was saying, like, why isn't this in your personal statement? They said, I didn't think it was relevant. I'm like, that is exactly what they're asking for. That's exactly the kinds of things they want to hear about. Again, nobody has a right to your story, but those are the kinds of things, like, I was really motivated by this. Because I think one of the challenging things, especially for transfer students and for my adult returning students, right, is, am I parenting and pregnant, right? All of these are challenges in their own ways. And sometimes, you're 2 out of 3, 3 out of the 4. But to come back to school after a break is a big deal. And I think not enough people acknowledge that. And I think, Cameron Cook refers to new traditional, or new traditional instead of non-traditional, right? Because there's so many of us transfer students now. And so thinking about, like, what made you want to come back? Because, yes, I wanted to finish my degree, but you don't, like, I wasn't away for 11 years and suddenly was like, well, now's the time. I wanted to do it for myself. I wanted to change the legacy of my family. I'm the first one in my family to have a bachelor's, and I'm the first one to have a master's. And I'll tell you all, I still go, I can't believe I have a master's degree. Like, it was hard to believe I had a bachelor's, then it was hard to believe I had a master's. And so thinking about those things, and I talk about, like, I talked about in my personal statements, like, my father was an immigrant. He had a 7th grade education. My mom had some community college, but she didn't finish, right? So talking about these things that made me want to return. So that's another part even in this, right? So we can take this breaking down into 3 things, but we can break it down even further. And then how will you use your degree in your career choice? Now, here's the thing, my friends. A lot of folks get really caught up in, I don't know exactly what I'm going to do. That's okay. It is so okay. You do not need to have all the answers right now. You really do not. Nobody, if you get the scholarship, it's not like they're going to come back in a few years and be like, so this scholarship that you won 5 years ago, it says that you were going to use this degree to work with children, and now you don't work with children. Time to pay the money back. It doesn't work like that. They don't do that, right? They just want to know that you can have, you've got goals, that you're thinking ahead, right? That you're thinking about what those next steps are. That's really what they're asking for. And so you want to think about, again, it doesn't have to be a set job. It can absolutely just be a theme. I want to help. I want to be of service to people. I really like working in the medical field. I really love working in education. I really like working in the tech industry. I really like business, just seems really interesting to me. Again, talking about these general ideas is great. It does not have to be, I will be applying to such and such job at such and such time. It doesn't have to be like that, okay? So try and not get hung up on that. And I know that's easier said than done, because the question we're all asked as students is, what are you going to do with that degree? What are you going to do with that? Can't tell you how many times I got that question, especially when I switched to American Studies. What are you going to do with that? Are you going to teach? Yeah, and I do, but it's not the only thing I can do about it. It's about those transferable skills that I got, right? And so this is where I know we always seem to like have to have an answer. And then if we've given an answer for a while, it's hard to like change that answer because like, well, I told everyone I was doing this. Now I don't want to tell them. It doesn't matter. This again is a personal statement for scholarship. You just want to have those ideas. Okay. Then the next part on this. What are some obstacles and barriers you have had to overcome to get where you are today? And how do they relate to your education and your career paths, right? So I'll tie this into the work that I do here. And please know, y'all, I did not come back to school knowing that I was going to work in higher education. That's another fun fact about your your hostess today, Darcy, is I had no idea. I applied for a job in the Academic Advisement Center as a student assistant when I started my master's. I was like, okay, I'll try this out. And then I fell in love with it. I worked in the jewelry industry. I worked in the coffee industry. I worked for a punk rock star for a while. I've had a lot of life before I came to higher ed. And so it's not like I was sitting in class going like, I can't wait to work in higher ed. It's not that I'm anti-working in higher ed. I love working in higher ed, but it's a matter of I had all this other life that happened. And so thinking about education and career paths and obstacles and barriers, right? I think about in regards to part of the reason I stayed out of school for 11 years is because I was told by an advisor before I left OCC that if I was going to transfer, I had to take one more math class. Y'all, I majored in humanities and social sciences and not math for a reason. And that reason was I didn't want to do more math. And I was like, oh, okay. I'll suck it up. I'll I'll eventually take that math class. So when I came back to school, the first thing in my brain was I got to take another math. I didn't even know what math I was supposed to take. I just had to take another math. And then I sat down with a newer counselor at OCC and I said, well, I know that I've got to take a math class. And they were like, no, you don't. I was like, what? No, you could transfer right now if you wanted to. You have enough units to transfer. What? So that kind of obstacle for me is what has driven me as a professional in higher ed to make sure I give students the correct information, to make sure that I am an accurate resource for students, not just giving them info. Because if you are not giving that, that information, it can change the course of somebody's life. And it did mine for quite some time, right? And then I came back. And so thinking about those obstacles and then my career path, awesome. I can also tie it in for myself, again, in higher ed to being a first generation student and having no clue as what to do. I couldn't find my CSUF email for like 3 months when I first got here. And I kept seeing the system messages and I was like, I'm really surprised they're not sending me more emails. Oh, because that wasn't my email, right? Because when I got to school the last time, I registered by phone, dial, and you'd wait and hope like, oh, I hope they're gonna tell me I'm in the class, right? So thinking about making sure resources and understanding those, that's how I connect it. Right? That's how I connect it. But I've seen students look like right now I'm working with a number of students who are applying to social work programs. And so some of them have shared about, coming from challenging backgrounds and how the social workers that helped them is what inspired them to become a social worker, right? And I know sometimes when we think about our majors, we think about our career paths, the first thing we think about is maybe stability and financial stability and security. And I hear that. But that's not what they're looking for. They want to think about like, what is the thing that sparked your interest in this? Oh, I love marketing. Oh my gosh, human services. I love working with people, right? These different kinds of things. And like, kind of reflect back for yourself and reflect back thinking about what are those things that connect from maybe a couple years ago, the first time you're in school, maybe earlier, those different kinds of things in order to really connect moving forward, right? Looking forward. You'll find those connections. And if you're having a hard time finding those connections, don't be afraid to talk it out with someone, right? So this is where, when you're breaking down these personal statements, you really want to make sure that you're hitting all of these. Okay, did I do it 2 pages double spaced? Yes. And the reason why I really emphasize that is because sometimes if a personal statement is over the minimum or over the max, they won't read it and you won't be considered. So don't do that to yourself. Again, did you tell us about your academic and professional goals? Did you tell us about what motivated you to return to college? And so a lot of times when you are writing and you're starting that document, take the pieces and plug them in, right? So take that, tell us about yourself and your academic and professional goals, put that almost as like a header, put it in bold and write that part underneath it. Then what motivated you to return to college? Put that part underneath that. How will you use your degree in your career choice? Put that part under that. So then you know, hey, I'm hitting all these things. It's a great way to break down the personal statement. So that is kind of our overview of personal